Hey everybody, a few bits of business before I get into today's video. First of all, I've started an alternate channel where I'm going to be posting random things from my life, just things that aren't scripted videos about science and critical thinking. That stuff will go on the other channel. I'll put a link in the doobly-doo below. And it's just going to be, dog videos and hiking and food and I don't know, just whatever I feel like doing. So please go subscribe to that if you're interested in that sort of thing. If not, then just stay here and we'll have a good time. Also, as usual, all these videos are sponsored by my patrons over at patreon.com/Rebecca. And I love you all for supporting me because, YouTube doesn't always like the topics of my videos and doesn't think that they're friendly to advertisers. So it really means a lot that you guys are supporting me over on Patreon. Okay, getting into today's video, I am going to start with a little mental health pro tip. If you're taking antidepressants or other pharmaceuticals to help you in your mental health care journey, please do not stop taking them without speaking to your doctor first, because just going off your meds can be very bad for you. Of course, I am not a doctor at all, especially I'm not your doctor, and so nothing I say in these videos should ever supersede what your doctor says. Also, if you're feeling depressed or suicidal, please speak to a doctor about it. If you don't have access to a doctor due to lack of insurance or money, there are, in the US at least, a lot of community-based health centers that might be able to help you on a sliding scale. Or if you are in the United States, you can get help 24/7 from the National Alliance on Mental Health by texting NAMI to 741-741. Okay, on to today's topic, which probably won't surprise you. Antidepressants. Do they work? And if they do work, then why are a bunch of news outlets and fake news outlets like the Daily Mail reporting that a new study says they do not work? All of these outlets are referring to a study published last week in the open access peer-reviewed journal PLOS ONE. The study itself is titled Antidepressants and Health-Related Quality of Life, HRQOL, for Patients with Depression, Analysis of the Medical Expenditure Panel Survey from the United States. And this comes from pharmacologists at King Saud University in Saudi Arabia, led by Omar A. Al-Mohammed. The researchers looked at an existing database of about 17.5 million Americans who were diagnosed with depression, and over the course of 11 years, they were followed by the survey. Some of them were prescribed antidepressants, and some of them were not. The researchers concluded in this study, the real-world effect of using antidepressant medications does not continue to improve patients' HRQOL over time. HRQOL stands for Health-Related Quality of Life, which encompasses both physical and mental health. In this particular study, they used SF-12, which is a 12-question survey that the subjects filled out themselves. The questions are things like, did your physical health prevent you from doing certain activities in the past week? Or did your mental health limit you in any way? Like, did you accomplish less than you wanted? Things like that. And the scoring system for this particular survey is proprietary, but you can find a free version online if you want an idea of what it's like. There's a link in the transcript, which I link below. And I took it, for instance, and I learned that I'm apparently doing better than the average American, which is nice, and for which I should declare as a conflict of interest, I credit an intensive mental health improvement regimen, which includes SSRIs, which is an antidepressant medication, but more on that in a bit. So, did this study show that antidepressants don't work? No. despite the headlines. The best that a person can say about this study is that they found a good hypothesis to test in a future study. This was a preliminary look at existing data that might inform how researchers explore this topic in the future. But there are far too many problems to support the author's conclusions. So let's look at a few of those issues that I found most glaring personally. To start, even the author's conclusion isn't antidepressants don't work. It's antidepressants don't continue to improve a person's quality of life year after year. As someone who takes SSRIs, that's not how I expect them to work. My pills more or less ended my severe spikes in anxiety and depression, and that's enough for me. I don't need every day to be happier than I was yesterday. I don't expect to achieve pure enlightenment after 5, 10, or 15 years of taking these pills. It's like if I were taking a pill for a chronic, incurable physical malady, I don't assume that taking a pill every day to treat it is going to cure it. It's just a thing that I have to do every day in order to get to normal. And that's fine. It's better than being an anxious, suicidal mess every day. I've talked openly on this channel and elsewhere about my anxiety and depression and prescription in the past. So you might already know that earlier this year, I screwed up and I forgot to take my SSRI for several days. And I noticed because I woke up in the middle of the night panicking about death and, the eventual end of the universe. And I thought at the time, wow, I haven't had an episode like this since before I started taking my SSRI. Oh crap, I forgot to take my SSRI. And in a weird way, I'm kind of glad that I screwed up my meds because it was a compelling piece of evidence in favor of the idea that I still need that medication because it is still actively improving my life. Also, by the way, yes, I highly recommend putting timer caps on your meds if you're like me and you constantly are trying to remember whether or not you took your meds today. I've got the timer cap. I have an alert on my phone. It's serious business. So anyway, in my opinion, it's perfectly fine for a medication to improve your life up to a baseline and then no further. That's fine. There are also a lot of issues with the study just based on the data that they had available to them. Or more accurately, I guess I should say the data that they did not have. They had no idea what medications these patients were prescribed. And I don't just mean which SSRI are they on, Paxil or Lexapro. I mean, they don't even know if they were on SSRIs or SNRIs, a completely different drug like Effexor, or MAOIs like Nardil, I swear I'm not making these up, or atypical medications like Wellbutrin or Remeron. Further, they didn't know how much of these medications patients were prescribed. Like, are they on the minimum dose like me, or are they on the maximum safe dose? Who knows? Even further, they had no way of knowing how well the patients stuck to the prescribed pill regimen. Finding the right meds to help depression and anxiety is extremely difficult for most people. And often patients will give up early because they don't like the side effects, which can include sexual dysfunction, weight fluctuations, cold sweats, and perhaps somewhat ironically, suicidal ideation. And don't forget, this is also about Americans who don't have easy access to affordable healthcare and prescriptions. So finding the right medication can also be really costly. And if a patient loses their job, that means they lose their healthcare and they can't even afford to fill the prescription. None of that is accounted for in this study, nor do they account for the fact that 30% of patients have treatment-resistant depression, meaning that none of those drugs are going to work, and those people have to seek out different therapies. Oh, and also they have no way to account for the severity of the depression, mild or severe, ongoing or situational. Zero data to talk about any of that. But wait. There's even more. They also couldn't control for how long patients in their data set had been on antidepressants prior to the start of the tracking. Take me, for example. If you start monitoring my quality of life right now, and then on for the next 5 years as I continue to take my SSRI every day, then yeah, you probably won't see much, if any, improvement in my quality of life. Because again, the massive improvement happened 10 years ago when I first started taking it. If I had taken that SR12 survey prior to my diagnosis and that prescription, I would have failed. You can't fail a mental health survey, but I would have failed. Sorry, you failed, so you have to go repeat your entire adult life until you get it right. My anxiety and depression negatively affected every aspect of my life, not just in terms of my friendships and my hobbies and my work, but even my physical health, as it caused me to have severe acid reflux that made me so nauseated and unable to eat. And sometimes I wasn't even able to get out of the fetal position because of the pain in my stomach. And now I'm great. Life still happens. I do occasionally get anxiety or depression sometimes. I went through a really bad breakup about 5 years ago, and I was horribly depressed. So I actually went to a psychiatrist who tried increasing my meds dosage. And I found that it didn't really help. So we went back to the minimum, and instead she prescribed me a dog, which actually worked really well. So does that mean that my SSRI isn't doing anything? No, it just means more SSRIs didn't equate to less depression for me when life got really ugly. I needed a little something extra to get me through it. And a lot of people are like that, which is why there are a lot of ways to treat depression. Drugs, support animals, talk therapy, group therapy, exercise, diet changes, electroconvulsive therapy. All of these things have their place when the situation requires. Depression is a complicated disorder that differs wildly between people and can even change within a person's life due to what's going on around them. You can't look at a data set of millions of patients and say anything meaningful about how these drugs affect the average person with depression, especially when you don't know how severe the patient's depression is, what comorbidities they have, what drugs they were prescribed and in what dosage, when they were first prescribed these meds, and whether or not they actually filled the prescription at all, and whether or not they then adhered to that regimen. So no, this study in no way supports the idea that antidepressants don't work. Personally, as someone who is extremely antagonistic towards big pharma and who prefers to improve my health without medication whenever possible, I would love to see more studies that look at exactly how different antidepressants work in different people. And also, why some people are treatment resistant, and, how we can improve access to good mental health care for the average person, and whether or not we might need to make societal changes that will benefit people's mental health more than medication. Unfortunately, all this study does is scare the average person away from a therapy that might change their life for the better.